At his ex-wife's upscale wedding, he showed up in work boots and left with her perfect life in ruins. One glance from the groom, and the party froze. Secrets surfaced, masks fell, and the bride's fairy tale shattered before she ever said, "I do." What was supposed to be a picture-perfect day became a public reckoning no one would forget. It had been 5 years since Jake's world flipped upside down. One morning, Elena packed her designer bags, looked around their modest two-bedroom house like it was a motel she'd accidentally booked, and said the words Jake would never forget. "You were always too small for me." She didn't mean height. He didn't argue, didn't plead. He just stood there silent, while the woman he'd once believed in walked out of his life and into a world of status, luxury, and curated brunches on rooftop patios. For months afterward, the silence was louder than anything. The house didn't echo. It accused. Every room reminded him he wasn't enough, not rich enough, not refined enough, not interesting enough. But Jake didn't wallow. He worked. The carpentry business he started from scratch grew slowly, then steadily. He wasn't making headlines, but his hands were always busy, his nights always peaceful. There were no lies in sawdust, no betrayals in wood grain, just honest labor and a life rebuilt one project at a time. The pain eventually dulled, not because he forgot her, but because he found something better: purpose. Real friends, a clear conscience. That was worth more than champagne toasts and social media clout. Then out of nowhere came the envelope. Cream-colored, heavy embossed gold lettering that practically screamed money. No return address, just his name written in careful cursive. Jake thought it might be a client referral at first, a luxury job maybe, some penthouse needing custom shelving. He opened it and froze. It was a wedding invitation. Elena was getting married to a man named Nathan Holloway. The venue? A hilltop estate overlooking the city. Formal attire suggested, black tie optional, but not really. Jake stared at the invitation, one eyebrow raised. Was this a mistake? Had she meant to invite him? Was it a sick joke? But something about the way his name was written, it wasn't accidental. There was no RSP card, just the date. And a line that read, "Witness the beginning of forever." He could have tossed it, could have laughed and gone back to sanding cabinet doors, but something gnawed at him. Not revenge, not curiosity, something quieter. Closure. Jake hadn't thought about Elena in months, maybe even a year. But now here she was, reappearing in the most dramatic way possible. And part of him wanted to see it, to look her in the eyes and show her that he hadn't just survived without her. He had built something she would never understand. He didn't call anyone, didn't tell his buddies at the shop, didn't overthink it. He just circled the date on the calendar. Quietly, the day arrived. He finished a project that morning, a handmade kitchen table for a newlywed couple. As he wiped down the finished surface, he thought, "This is real. This lasts." Then he cleaned up, changed into jeans and a collared shirt that still held a trace of sawdust, and got in his truck. The drive to the venue wound up into the hills, the kind of place that had security at the gate and valets who looked confused when a dusty pickup pulled up. Jake handed them the keys without explanation and walked in. He wasn't there to impress anyone. He was there to witness. The estate was exactly what he expected: grand, expensive, echoing with curated laughter and the clinking of overpriced glassware. Guests milled about in designer suits and dresses, flashing veneers and fake hellos. Jake walked through them like a ghost. No one recognized him. Not yet. And then he heard her laugh. It was the same laugh he used to hear on lazy Sundays, back when life was simple and love didn't have terms and conditions. Now it echoed from the balcony like a marketing slogan. He looked up, and there she was, Elena dressed in white, surrounded by women who looked like magazine ads. Her expression changed when she spotted him. Surprise first, then amusement, and finally something smug. She raised her glass. "Well, look who actually showed up." The bridesmaids turned. Laughter followed. "Did you lose a bet or something?" one of them asked. "Jake, is it?" Another chimed in, feigning politeness. Still fixing tables in that little cabin of yours? Elena's smile sharpened. Didn't expect you'd find parking in a place like this? Jake didn't flinch, didn't smile, didn't play into their script. It's peaceful, he said simply, and everything I own is paid off. The laughter wobbled, then faded a bit, just a bit. They expected him to wilt, to apologize for existing. But Jake stood tall, calm as ever, because what they didn't know was that the punchline was coming, and none of them were ready for it. The laughter had barely settled when a new wave of guests arrived from the terrace. More polished smiles, more champagne clinking. But Jake didn't care. He was scanning the crowd for one person, the man Elena thought would complete her fairy tale. He didn't have to look long. Nathan Holloway stepped through the archway, chatting with two older men in tuxedos, confident, polished, the image of success. But when his eyes landed on Jake, everything changed. He froze mid-step. His hand jerked slightly, the glass in his grip sloshing. The two men beside him kept walking, unaware. Nathan, though, had turned pale. He wasn't blinking. He looked like he'd seen a ghost. Jake met his stare without emotion. The music played on. Conversations swirled. But to Nathan, the room might as well have gone silent. He took a hesitant step forward, then another, then stopped. Elena noticed. "Nate!" she called out, puzzled. She followed his gaze. Her smirk vanished. "Wait, do you two know each other?" Jake didn't answer. He just watched Nathan, whose expression was unraveling fast. Nathan swallowed hard. "Yes," he said. "More than you can imagine." Elena blinked. "What's that supposed to mean?" Nathan turned toward her, voice tight. "It's nothing. It was a long time ago." Elena frowned, suddenly unsure of her footing. "How long?" Jake stepped in. "Ask him where we met." Her eyes darted between them. "Where did you meet?" Nathan shifted uncomfortably. His grip tightened on the glass. Jake didn't move. Ask him what he was doing before he pivoted to entrepreneurship. Ask him what happened at Westgate Capital. Nathan's jaw tightened. Elena's brow furrowed. "Wait, you worked in finance?" Nathan hesitated. "It was before we met. Another life. A firm uptown. I left it behind. It's not important." Jake didn't let up. He didn't just leave it behind. He ran. After the feds got involved. The air shifted. Guests began noticing. Conversation slowed. Elena's voice dropped. "The feds?" Nathan's face was turning red. He raised a hand, signaling for her to stop, but she didn't. "What is he talking about, Nathan?" He sighed. "It was complicated. I was part of a team. There were some trades, some mistakes. The firm covered it. I left. That's all." Jake tilted his head. "Mistakes? Is that what we're calling insider trading and securities fraud now?" The room went silent. Even the string quartet paused. A few guests turned fully toward them, sensing something real for the first time all evening. Elena's hands fell to her sides. You were involved in that?" Jake nodded slowly. "I was the whistleblower. I handed everything to the SEC. He flipped, cut a deal, and disappeared." Nathan looked down. "I didn't know she was your wife back then," he said quietly. "That's supposed to make this better?" Elena's voice trembled. "You lied about everything." Nathan stepped forward. "I didn't lie. I just didn't bring it up." "You changed your name, Nathan. You moved cities. You rebuilt your image on a foundation of lies." Jake stood still, letting it unfold. This wasn't his fight anymore. It was truth doing the heavy lifting now. The crowd around them had grown. Guests whispered, eyebrows raised. Elena's bridesmaids stepped back slightly, unsure where to stand. One guest, a man in a dark blazer, spoke up from the edge of the group. "Wait, Westgate Capital? Is this why the investigation went cold?" "They said someone inside helped the feds, but no one ever knew who." Jake nodded. "That was me, and he's the one who got the golden parachute before it all collapsed." Elena looked shattered. "So you knew. You knew who he was, and you still came?" Jake's voice was calm. "I didn't come to ruin your wedding. I came because you invited me. Maybe that was a mistake, or maybe it was fate." She stared at him, eyes glassy. "You planned this." He shook his head. I trusted karma. Karma just asked me to show up. Nathan turned to the crowd, attempting damage control. None of this changes who I am now. I built something real. I moved on. But no one was listening anymore, because the fairy tale had a crack, and the truth was pouring through it. Elena stepped back, shaken. Jake didn't smile. He didn't gloat. He just stood there, watching the lie unravel itself, and knowing this was only the beginning. The guests were no longer whispering. They were openly watching now, phones forgotten, drinks left untouched. The wedding had stopped being a celebration and turned into a spectacle. Elena stood still, her eyes locked on Nathan. "You promised me," she said quietly. "You told me you had nothing to hide." Nathan took a step closer, his voice low and rushed. "Elena, I had to lie. If I told you the truth, you would have walked away. You wanted someone with money, power, reputation? That's who I became. For us." Her expression changed. It wasn't just anger now. It was realization. "I wanted a clean slate," he added. "I didn't think it would catch up to me. I didn't think he'd show up." Jake remained silent. He didn't need to speak. Everything was unfolding exactly as it needed to. Elena turned away from Nathan and faced her guests. "I left my husband because I thought he was too ordinary, too simple. I wanted more." She looked back at Jake, then to Nathan. "And this is what I traded for it." One of the bridesmaids spoke up, her voice shaking. "You said your ex lived in a shack, that he was bitter and broke, that he couldn't let go of you." Elena blinked, embarrassed. An older man near the back of the crowd stepped forward. "Nathan, is it true? You were involved in the SEC investigation? We heard rumors back then, never knew who was behind it." Nathan didn't answer. His silence told the whole story. Jake finally spoke. His voice was steady. "I didn't come to tear anything down. I came to witness it. That's all. But since I'm here, I'll say this. When Elena left me, she didn't just walk away from a person. She walked away from everything that didn't fit her new life. She needed something shinier." He paused. "I didn't shine. I just worked." The words settled like a stone in still water. "I build homes, not illusions," he continued. "I wake up without pretending to be someone I'm not. And that's why I can stand here without shame." Nathan looked at him, jaw clenched. "You think you're better than me?" "No," Jake said. "But I know I'm not a fraud." The tension was unbearable. The crowd didn't move. Even the staff seemed frozen. Elena's shoulders sagged slightly. She looked down at the engagement ring on her finger like it had betrayed her. Then she took it off. She turned to Nathan. "You lied to me about who you were. But worse, you let me build a life on it." Nathan reached for her hand, panicking. "Elena, we can fix this. It's not too late. We just have to explain." "Explain what?" she snapped. "That we almost tied the knot with a man whose past is radioactive? That I stood up here judging others while I was marrying a lie?" She looked around. "They're not going to forget this." "No one is." Nathan looked at the guests, at the camera crew now awkwardly packing up, his face twisted into desperation. "This wasn't supposed to happen," he muttered. He pointed at Jake. "You set this up." Jake shook his head. "You did that when you decided the truth didn't matter." More murmurs rippled through the crowd. One woman quietly left, heels clicking against the tile. A couple followed. The unraveling had begun. Elena stared at Jake. "You knew everything. You could have warned me." "I could have," Jake said. "But you wouldn't have listened. You were too busy making sure everyone knew how far above me you'd climbed." A long silence followed. Then Elena spoke again, her voice faint but clear. "Did you come just to destroy me?" Jake looked at her with something that almost resembled pity. "No," he said. "You already did that. I just made sure you had to watch." Nathan stood alone now, breathing hard, his world closing in. The crowd had turned cold. Elena took a slow step away from him. The ceremony was over, and the truth had taken center stage. The ceremony didn't end with a dramatic exit or shattered champagne glasses. It ended with silence. Elena stood at the altar, no longer a bride, just a woman in a dress meant for someone else's future. Around her, the crowd that once buzzed with envy now watched with uncomfortable detachment, like witnesses to a fire that was already out of control. The veil she had once adjusted so carefully hung loose, forgotten. Her bridesmaids slowly stepped away, not all at once, but in small movements that said everything. Whatever loyalty they had evaporated the moment the cameras stopped recording. Nathan was the only one who didn't move. He stood frozen, eyes locked on Elena, waiting for her to say something, anything, that might pull him back from the edge. But she was done speaking. The wedding planner, unsure what to do, quietly approached. Miss, I mean, Mrs. Do you still want the ceremony to continue? Elena didn't answer. She blinked, as if just realizing where she was. Her gaze swept the room. The untouched buffet, the emptying chairs, the caterers quietly stepping out of sight. It wasn't a wedding anymore. It was a collapse. She looked at Nathan one more time. Her voice came out soft, steady. You're not dragging me down with you. He stepped forward. We can talk. We can leave. Just us. No, she said, pulling her hand away. It's over. She removed her veil and let it drop to the floor. The symbolic gesture wasn't for show. It was survival. Then she turned, walked down the aisle meant for her grand entrance, and left. No music, no applause. No one followed her. Nathan didn't chase her, not right away. He stood there surrounded by the weight of his own past finally catching up. Guests avoided eye contact. A few quietly slipped out, suddenly remembering other obligations. Jake remained near the back, unmoving. He hadn't expected a scene like this. He'd simply wanted her to know the truth. But now, watching the implosion unfold, he realized something else. He didn't feel satisfied. He just felt finished. It was Elena's aunt who approached him near the valet, a woman Jake remembered from years ago, kind, quiet, and observant. You've changed, she said, not unkindly. Jake nodded. So has she. Difference is, I grew. She paused, then said, I hope she understands one day what she gave up. Jake didn't respond. Some truths don't need repeating. By the time Nathan finally left the venue, running to find Elena, the crowd was gone. Whatever reputation he'd tried to protect had crumbled. Word had already begun to spread. Guests texting, photos being deleted, planners whispering to each other. The fallout had started before the last guest reached their car. Jake drove home quietly. No music. No rush. The next morning he returned to his shop. Nothing had changed there. Tools were where he left them, projects waiting for him like loyal friends. He got back to work, and just like that, life continued, but not for everyone. 3 years passed. The wedding that never happened became legend in certain circles. Whispers at corporate parties, quiet jokes at charity galas. People called it the hilltop collapse. A story of a groom with a shadowed past, a bride chasing perfection, and an ex-husband who showed up like a footnote and left as the only one standing. Jake never talked about it. He didn't need to. His carpentry business kept growing. Not fast, not flashy, but steady. He hired a few good men, young, hard-working, looking for direction. They learned to measure twice, cut once, and let their work speak for them. Jake taught them how to build more than furniture. He taught them how to build lives. Nathan's story didn't end at the altar. After the wedding fallout, regulators reopened files that had been buried. The sudden public exposure made hiding impossible. Nathan's old firm was dragged back into the spotlight. Deals unraveled, licenses revoked. He lost access to every board he'd quietly joined. Partners pulled out. Investors vanished. By the time it was over, the fortune he'd built on deception was frozen, then gone. He moved again. New city, new name, trying once more to start over. But this time the stain followed. His face was too easy to search, his name a cautionary tale on professional forums. His credibility was gone for good. Elena's fall was quieter, but in many ways heavier. She tried to return to her old social life, but invitations dried up. Friends distanced themselves, not because they hated her, but because association carried risk. People in her world didn't tolerate embarrassment. She launched a podcast, Reclaiming Me. It lasted 2 episodes. Listens were low, comments were cruel. Eventually, she moved back to the edge of the city, into a smaller apartment not far from where she used to scoff at average lives. She picked up a job in marketing, entry-level, modest hours, the kind of job she once said she'd never settle for. But now it was what she had. For the first time, she lived the kind of life she once mocked. And Jake? He stayed where he was. The workshop, the projects, the small team he mentored, these became his rhythm. Clients trusted him. Referrals kept coming. He built bookcases, tables, custom kitchens, and a reputation for doing honest work in a world that valued shortcuts. He never gloated, never chased headlines. That wasn't the point. One afternoon, while installing shelving in a client's study, he received a letter, cream envelope, no return address, just his name, carefully written. He opened it. Inside was a simple note. "You were right about everything. I hope you found the peace I chased away. Elena." Jake stood for a moment, the note in his hand, then folded it and placed it in a drawer. Did he feel something? Yes. But not satisfaction, not anger, just a quiet sense of closure. Because in the end, he didn't win by destroying anyone. He won by staying true to himself. Some people spend their lives chasing images, always looking for reflections that flatter them. Jake built with wood, steel, and truth, and he slept peacefully every night. That was enough.